everyone, to the Mars Innovation Forum brought to you by Explore Mars, where we are engaging in an in-depth look at the innovations that can help create sustainability on Mars and also have profound sustainable implications for Earth. I'm delighted to be moderating the Feeding Mars panel, where we're going to ask the experts in space agriculture what they are innovating and how current mission planners might incorporate their expertise, how scalable these innovations are, and what the major challenges are in achieving these innovations on Mars and up and out there. Allow me to introduce this esteemed panel, for which we are very grateful to sharing your time with us today. First up, let me say welcome to Shireen Reza. She is the CEO and co-founder of Astrius, a food innovation company redefining the multi-sensory pleasure of eating in space, focusing on an integrative approach to human health. And truly, guys, this is amazing. As the first commercial company specialized in space nutrition, they engineer products to meet the needs of astronauts whose cognitive and physical fitness is paramount to their success in space. And they have a team of Michelin star chefs, former NASA astronauts, nutritional biochemists, aerospace engineers, and medical doctors working together to redefine the future of nutrition paired with also pleasure. So welcome everybody, Shireen Reza.
Thank you so much for this introduction, Janet. Now at Astrius, we think about food and space as ways that can bring more joy in one's life. And today, I'd like to talk to you about what it means to fuel your exploration. It takes me back to the words of T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. One of my favorite conversations with food philosopher Julian Bagani was when he was telling me that the idea of food only as fuel and something we should not delight in takes away from the beauty of humanity in space. You see, experiencing the pleasure of eating is what distinguishes us from animals. To be human is to be able to eat in a fuller sense. And so today, I'd like to talk to you about the recipe for protopia. When we talk about Mars and innovation and colonization, our brain immediately jumps to science fiction. But in sci-fi, when one imagines the future, you're either thinking of this dystopic projection when all is horror and chaos, or one of utopic bliss. At Astrius, we're really aiming for protopia, where we're no longer fighting for survival or expecting perfection. Rather, the aim is to create a healthier and realistic strategy where we desire to better tomorrow by taking into account the infrastructural challenges that are inevitable. And of course, when it comes to food and space, this involves a whole different set of challenges, particularly the challenge of food production and waste management, but also food preservation and preparation. You see, it's very important that we move beyond pick and eat, because you actually need a cook on the mission. We don't talk very much about how to prepare food, but that is as big of a challenge as the production itself. So while leveraging a growing field of technology that is producing the textures and flavors of meat without live animals in space is crucial, we have to understand that companies like the Impossible Food and Beyond Meat substitutes are extraordinarily high in sodium, because what they're doing is they're relying on salt as a crutch in an otherwise rather bland food product. What we focus on in Astrius is to create flavor in elements that really go beyond sodium. Now, why is that important? Well, on Earth, 1 in 5 deaths is actually a direct result of having too much salt in your diet. But when it comes to astronauts, high salt intake can increase acidity in the body, which can accelerate bone loss. And that is a big problem for astronauts. So it really takes us to the concept of trigeminal stimulation. We've had the pleasure of numerous interviews with astronauts, and here you'll see Greg Shamathoff, who's on our team. He has spent over 200 days on the International Space Station, and he talks to us about the sensory perception of smell and taste changing when you're in microgravity. You can think of it akin to a head cold, or if some of you have had the misfortune of experiencing COVID and you can't smell or taste anything, it comes from the fact that your perception of flavor is impacted 80% by the olfactory sensation. This is what you smell. So astronauts love sriracha sauce because that spiciness actually opens up the passageway. And this is trigeminal stimulation. It comes from things like chili pepper, mint, cinnamon, wasabi. And so trigeminal stimulation allows you to smell your food internally, even if your nose is all clogged up externally. So it takes us back to the spice trade, which was the driving force behind colonialization of India and other Asian lands. Spices were very important back in the Middle Ages. In fact, they were as valuable as gold and diamond, and it was the single most important force driving the world's economy. This may sound familiar to you when we talk about space, but the lack of refrigeration and poor standards of hygiene meant that food spoiled quickly, and spices were in great demand to mask the flavor of food that was far from fresh. We often think of the British Empire as being the mecca of colonization, but it was actually the Portuguese Prince Henry the Navigator who launched the very first European voyage. And his initial motivation was actually that he'd heard so many stories about the great centers of trade in the East, particularly India, when it came to spices, such as nutmeg, cinnamon, clove. So he put together this team of experts, such as geographers, navigators, map makers, and astronomers, to find a shorter sea route directly to India. And the main product he brought back to Lisbon was black pepper. So I focus on the importance of spice because it was not only one of the earliest drivers of globalization when it came to the British plundering India, the Dutch in Indonesia, or the Spanish and Portuguese in South and Central America, but spices cannot be amiss when it comes to the way they were used as both medicinal ingredients as well as condiments. So when it came to medieval recipes, people were using a combination of medical and culinary lore in order to prevent diseases. Merchant guilds that supplied these spices were variously known as spicers or apothecaries. Nowadays, when I hear apothecary, I think of a pharmacy. It's interesting because in 2021, we see a lot of ingredients like turmeric being blended into coffee, which personally I think is ridiculous because turmeric in coffee, according to me, tastes awful. In the East, we use turmeric in curry. We use it in dal. But the concept behind it is the realization that these ingredients, these spices, these herbs have a greater impact than just taste and flavor alone. So to that extent, when we're really speaking about colonizing the moon and colonizing Mars, it is important to take a pause and look back at our history of plundering the now developing world for the advancement of the developed world. And what's really important to me is the concept that space is really where humanity is at its best. So we should translate what we learn in space for the betterment on Earth. And on that note, when it comes to the international community coming together, food is really the crux of it all. It takes a much bigger role in the mental health and well-being of astronauts. As we're aiming to become this spacefaring civilization, food becomes central to how we interact with one another. Historically, it's been known to bring people together from different cultures, whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas. So our vision is to create an augmented experience of eating, which defines the greatest advantage of space travel. It doesn't matter what your culture, religion, or politics are. In space, we come together. So I actually love this image. My son was born on May 4th, and I personally love Darth Vader. I think he's the best villain there is. And for me, this idea of coming together over a meal really transcends our concepts in sci-fi, as well as historically. So at Astrius, we don't just want astronauts to survive this horrific experience of space. We want them to thrive and take real joy in it. Because even in space, what we're striving to do is the most extraordinarily and unprecedented things, but we don't want to get away from what it really means to be human. And food is a core part of that equation. This means taking pleasure in what you're eating. It impacts crew morale, conviviality. And I remember on this excellent interview we had with Canadian astronomer Robert Thirsk, he talked about the frictions and tensions that can build up with a crew throughout a day, but it's really over a meal that you break down that tension. And whether you're opening up a package or a tin, the idea is you sit together, you bond, you eat, and you have that sense of human connection. So for us, it's creating customized food dependent on what an astronaut's nutritional profile and flavor preferences are. Because when it comes to understanding food and nutrition, it's a very complex balance. You can't simply assemble the micronutrients astronauts need to survive. Think about it as music. In one sense, it's just a collection of notes. But the ways in which they're put together, the precise tones, make all the difference. One of the problems with fortification supplements is the way in which the body absorbs these different nutrients. There is a lot more at play. Now, I love the Star Trek idea of food where you just push some buttons and it arrives. But can you really create something as nutritious as natural food by assembling the broken down synthetically made components? For us, we believe that there's way more to food than calories in and calories out. There's actually a very strong emotional connection. Powerful memories can be elicited through smell and flavor. In fact, to me, food is most magical because it is a vehicle of time travel. Just by taking a morsel of a food, that can evoke this concept of childhood where it takes you right back to your mother's kitchen. It's that sense of memory and belonging. The nostalgic thread is really what keeps us attached to Earth. And as astronauts talk about this quite a bit, because at the end of the day, nostalgia comes from our past, and yet it has an immense impact on shaping our present. And here we are, yearning for a return to it when it comes to thinking about the future yet to come. So for us, it's important when we talk about nutrition and food that we don't forget that emotional connection to it all. And so really, it's a move back to the natural and organic. The ethos and tension with space food is the way in which space travelers reflect the idea that you have to marry technology with art. Now, in the past, collaborations between scientists and astronauts hasn't necessarily been at its best, and yet it's an absolute necessity with food in space. So at Astrius, our mission is to really humanize space food, rehumanize technology, and not see it as one versus the other. Technology is there as an enabler. However, the emotional side of food, the comfort, nostalgia, and pleasures of eating is a vital part of the existence of any voyager traveling where no woman or man has gone before. So when we're talking about the future of food, it is about a return to systems of agriculture and a means of manufacturing. I was going to chuckle at about the idea of Matt Damon cultivating potatoes on Mars. But potatoes can't just be picked up and eaten raw. You have to cook it. You have to prepare it. The Irish have found phenomenal ways of doing this. In fact, I love having a hearty bowl of Irish stew. It is soul food, the epitome of soul food. But you need to pair this with breakthrough technology when it comes to space travel. So ultimately, the food that we eat in space isn't going to be for Earth. And it's fascinating to discover what this journey may look like. But then, what can we really do to transfer that knowledge back to Earth? It's fascinating because what happens to the human body in space really is an acceleration of what happens to the human body on Earth. And this is why at Astrius, our first product out the door, which will be launching this summer, does just that. I'm going to talk to you more about Astrius later, but I'm really, really excited to know what our panelists have to say. Thanks again, Janet.
Thank you, Shireen. I cannot wait to try some of your food. It sounds amazing. And next on our panel is Pascal Rosenfeld, who is in charge of new ventures, space and European programs at Aleph Farms. It's a food company that paves the way for a new way forward as a leader of the global sustainable food ecosystem, cultivating, get this, quality steaks directly from the cells of a living animal, using a fraction of the resources, no antibiotics, and no GMO cells. It's huge. With a proven and scalable platform, it works together with the existing meat ecosystem to make sure the nutritional demands of a growing world population are addressed and our most precious natural resources are protected. It's backed by the most innovative food producers in the world, Cargill, Micros, and the Strauss Group. The company has recently received top accolades for its contributions to the global sustainability movement from the World Economic Forum, UNESCO, and the European Commission, and EIT Food. Welcome, Pascal Rosenfeld.
So thank you, Janet. This is a pleasure to be here. This is a highly inspiring forum. I wanted to share my screen, if you allow me. I'll present a few slides on our company and the achievements. So Aleph Farms, as you clearly said, is cultivating high-quality beef steaks and directly from cells that we isolate from a healthy cow without killing animals, which is quite handy when it comes to growing food out of space when there's pretty much no land for that. Our technology stems from medical research and tissue engineering, which allows us to produce many different types of cells, and not only the muscle fibers, but the full structured muscle. Our mission is to build resilient and sustainable food system for tomorrow. That means high quality nutrition for anyone and anywhere, whether on Earth or on Mars or beyond. Here you can see a few other milestones, specifically the last version of our three-dimensional ribeye steak that was announced in February, and an early mission on the ISS 1.5 years ago. Our next mission will be in a few months from now on the ISS again. So again, why do we do this? This is the main question. As you understand, the human population grew parabolic, and we are currently using almost 2 planets to feed all of us. So in short, we think that we can feed the world, but in fact, we don't have enough natural resources to feed the world presently. We have to think again. And the way we are developing is that we are borrowing from our children, obviously. The second thing is that agriculture, precisely when we talk about space and land, specifically on other planets, agriculture is the second most polluting industry on our planet Earth. And 50% of the habitable land is used for agriculture, and half of that arable land is used for cattle only as fodder. So we destroy natural habitats and forest and biodiversity, water, etc. And on Mars, we clearly won't have this luxury. So how is this possible? Actually, we mimic nature, and instead of growing the full animal, which takes 2 to 3 years to bring it roughly to 600 or 700 kilos, and most likely half of it being discarded, and having a massive amount of natural resources discarded as well, we grow it outside of the animal in a bioreactor. We grow specific cells like muscle, fat, vascular system, collagen, extracellular matrix, and then we feed them with a natural growth medium, mostly water and sugars. We will come back to that later, in a bioreactor to provide them the warmth, pretty much like in the matrix of a mammal. And instead of 3 years, we bring that process down to 3 or 4 weeks, and a tiny fraction of the usual resources needed.
This is a bit of science fiction coming true. I mean, the fact that you can create a full ribeye steak in 3 to 4 weeks compared to 3 to 4 years, we're talking an exponential leap to the future of food production.
And you've not tasted it yet. You will be amazed.
That's what I want. It's like, I cannot wait to sit down and have a space meal with all of you. We will take that micronutrients that, Shireen is doing. We'll have that as our little aperitif. Then we'll go to the main course here with our steak. And I do want to make sure that everybody is and we're going to be rooting for you because I've read about this. Shireen and Pascal are joining forces. This is going to be amazing, guys. I'll be in the balcony cheering all the way for you. They have joined together as a team partnership in the NASA Deep Space Food Challenge, in which they hope will be a game changer that's going to allow sustainable space travel. The team's going to be composed of Aleph Farms and Astrius, and then several key partners to try and solve this major unresolved challenge. Because when you talk to astronauts, they do get a bit tired of the food, or they want something spicy and a little bit more like home. And I just have to say, Shireen and Pascal, I think and believe you have all the right stuff to not only win this challenge, but to propel nutrition forward. And I think it's important to and I would love your thoughts on this, because once you propel that kind of specialized nutrition for space, you turn it right back around and it benefits Earth, correct?
That's the most amazing part about this, Janet. Oftentimes we think of space nutrition as something far further into the distant future, but in truth, what happens to the human body in space is an acceleration to what happens to the human body on Earth. And I think COVID really brought to light the importance of nutrition, where we're suddenly thinking about well-being and how our body reacts to what we consume in a way that we've never done before. So what we really believe is the scientific innovations of nutrients in space has a direct impact to the way we think of food, both in terms of sustainability, flavor, and nutrition here on Earth.
You know what? I love that you're thinking about flavor, because as somebody who loves hot and spicy and savory and all of those things. Again, when we can all join together, we're going to sit down and have a space meal. It will be quite wonderful. So thank you guys, and thank you, Pascal. Also joining us today is Scott Bryson of Orbital Farms. Now, again, if you guys are thinking this is something that Isaac Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke would have included in one of their novels, you're probably right. But these are the people who are not only taking on the future, but they are making it all possible. Scott is driven by his desire to solve some of the largest problems humanity is currently facing, from climate change and food as a human right, when we know food is a human right. Scott's work is enabling humanity to become a multi-planetary species. And all of these thought processes led to the development of Orbital Farm. Orbital Farm is a project development company integrating technologies that are involved in closed-loop production and management of food, water, and fuel for long-term space missions. It does this today by developing and financing large-scale, profitable projects here on Earth addressing food insecurity, world hunger, and health. It builds fuel depots and energy storage projects using hydrogen fuel cells and long-term storage of water, H2 and O2. So again, I'm amazed, and you're developing technology for farming in space that will eventually support life on Earth. Again, benefits for all humanity. Scott, tell us more.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. We're very excited to be here, share a little bit more, and talk a little bit about what it takes to support human life in space and also here on Earth. Orbital Farm is my company. We've been around now for 3 years, and thank you very much, Janet, for the kind introduction and also for having us here. Really want to share a little bit about our story and about food and how much food is really important to every single one of us. This is something that's deeply passionate to individuals, from your family recipes that you've or recipes that you've crafted yourself, to our heritage and our culture. Food is really a fundamental part of our daily lives here on Earth. If we're fortunate enough to be able to afford 3 meals a day, it's also something that we interact with our friends and our families when we interact and meet with everyone. As Janet mentioned, if this was another time, we'd be sitting down, sharing a meal and talking, sharing stories. And the same thing happens in space. And food and these types of situations are really critical and important to connect human beings. And in space, the psychological benefit of having fresh, healthy, nutritious food that is wonderful and tasty, these are really important things that astronauts look forward to for their daily lives that are incredibly busy. But it's not easy, especially when we're considering trying to travel to Mars. 3-year missions are a very long time, and bringing food for that length of time, this takes a lot of food and a lot of packaging for that food itself. So just a 4-crew mission to Mars on a 3-year return mission will take 24,000 pounds of food and packaging. This is a significant amount of mass to be carrying just for 4 individuals. And if you want to scale that up, this is very difficult. This is not an easy thing to achieve. And when you start to add additional people to try to build any sort of colony or any sort of settlement that is sustainable, we've got a lot of serious challenges to get through. When we're thinking about how we're going to land on the moon, if we want to send 100 crew to go and set up a base on the moon, that same amount of food that 4 astronauts would take 3 years to consume will be completed in 44 days alone. When you want to take those 100 people to Mars on a 3-year mission, we're talking about 600,000 pounds of food and packaging. That's 2 full starships of just food alone. So when you start thinking, 10,000 people or larger communities, we're talking about an armada of 180 starships or over 180 starships just in order to be able to provide the food and packaging for a 3-year mission. What this really points to is that we really need capabilities to be able to feed people scalable production systems and food production systems. We need to do this in space, but we also have these challenges here on Earth as well. We're growing to another 3+ billion people in the next in the next 30 years. This is a huge challenge because the amount of food that it's going to take, if we continue the same path with the same food production systems that our agriculture system has been built on for the past 10,000 years, we're going to need 70% more production of food. And that's a really big problem when agriculture takes a significant amount of land. We have deforested the majority of our planet. We've overfished many and most of our oceans, and we see huge system collapses that have both already happened and will be happening towards the future. This on top of the fact that since 2014, the number of people that are going hungry every single day has been increasing, when we've made significant progress in the past towards reducing this. We think last year alone, due to COVID, we saw almost 100 million people that moved into hunger. This is a situation where these are major challenges and frankly unacceptable situation for what's going on. A large part of these problems is that we're in what's called a linear economy, where we take resources from the soil, from mining systems, from our oceans. We create and make a product. We'll use that or consume it. Waste, which food waste accounts for 30% of all food that's produced and 50% of the fresh food that's made, and then we throw it out into the garbage. And this concept of how these linear economies and systems are functioning, these are really big problems, both terrestrially here on Earth, but these are big problems everywhere that humanity goes, and they lead to ecology collapses. They lead to water poisoning. They lead to algae blooms. And what we need to move are towards systems that are closed loop systems, large scale circular systems, where the concept of waste is eroded. And what we look to are ways of reusing systems, then moving to recycling those systems to recreate new products. And if even past that, we can reconstitute some of the base elements into rebuilding new nutrients, new polymers, new oils and systems. And the circular type of approach is really critical for us to move into. And this isn't new. We've had greenhouses for a very long time. This is a wonderful example of how we can reuse simple things like water and the nutrients and recycling those within these systems. NASA's figured this out very well, and we're recycling over 90% of the water on the International Space Station today. And we think we can move that to 98% in a short time frame. These are fantastic shining light examples and why the aerospace industry is well positioned to be a leader and driving the change in the terrestrial systems that we've got here, because we don't have a very good track record here on Earth. Landfills, pollution are a serious and major problem, but we're not so innocent in the aerospace sector either. There are currently 96 bags of human waste sitting on the moon. They're all over the moon. And so if we just sit back and relax and be like, don't worry, we know how to recycle water on the International Space Station, we'll be perfectly fine and good when we go to Mars. Status quo shows us, and history shows us, that that's actually not true. That it takes a concerted effort to move towards looking at the challenges of food and waste that we produce within these systems and converting those into usable products and systems. Because when we look at our Earth, we are a closed ecosystem. We are isolated in space, and we have this fantastic natural ecosystem, and we have the natural environment that is the best example of the fact that there isn't waste in nature. There are single cell organisms, there are microbes, there are animals that are part of this entire ecosystem, and we all live symbiotically, and we really need to learn how to get there. And this is really important when we think back to how we're going to grow in the coming future. Where is food consumption going to grow? Where is that 70% increase in food that we need to really look towards? This is coming into the meats and the fish and the fresh dairy. These are very addressable markets, from some of the previous examples that we've heard before to newer technologies like vertical farming, recirculating aquaculture systems, cellular agriculture systems, and single cell proteins and plant-based foods have a capability of seriously addressing some of these growth challenges and the food consumption patterns that we're going to see in a growing population. And a really key focus that is often missed and not focused on enough is how we're going to address the growing lower income class, the middle and lower middle income, and the upper middle income classes of individuals. These households struggle and work every day and spend almost 50% of their daily income into surviving and paying for their food. These markets, which right now add up to these billion or so people that don't have enough food to eat, this is really where key focus needs to be applied, and where some of these transformative technologies can be applicable. Bringing it back into the space domain, one of the things that's really important to think about in thinking about how we build and develop an ecosystem of food production in space is how much time that we actually have. The astronauts' days are minutes. Every minute is scheduled. We've got half an hour to prepare your meal. That's it, and then only half an hour to eat the meal. And so you've got to think about systems that really optimize for automation, that optimize for the way that you're going to be able to produce types of food that don't take significant amounts of labor. Cellular agriculture, microbial agriculture, fermentation systems, these are fantastic technologies that really can be used. And we can produce amazing fish products, meat products, and many others. But variety is really important. When we think about our psychological differences and how our preferences of different food, and we're going to be an international community. So not everyone's going to like sushi. Not everyone's going to want to have steak. People are going to want to have that variety, and you're going to need to have that over a long period of time. And so thinking about how you build and integrate these systems, this is really where Orbital Farm is focused. We're trying to be the integrator that connects all of these different fantastic parties together. And how do these systems live together within an ecosystem? And food can't just be produced on its own, especially in space, but also here on Earth. Energy and energy production is also a huge need growing in our world today. And we can begin to develop these symbiotic relationships between food and energy, and how you balance these systems. How do you store some of that renewable energy? How do you bring wealth to existing farmers and farmland, and not remove farmland from production capabilities for 30 or 40 years when a solar plant goes down, into setting up systems that become climate independent, that are still able to be productive and produce food and bring new income streams to farmers. We also look towards developing industrial circular projects where we can take waste streams coming from industrial processes like carbon dioxide, wastewater, or even methane systems, and utilize these into processes to build investable commercial projects. Because when you're looking at developing, and this is an example of some of the work that was done in Japan into a life support system that had 2 goats and 2 humans within a closed ecosystem. These systems are incredibly complex, and they function very well in the small scale, but what we need to do is better understand each of these different individual components and how they operate at a larger scale if we want to move beyond having 4 astronauts in any sort of colony. In order to do that, we need to have many different analogs here on Earth that we can test and trial different integrations and different components, and produce different types of foods for different diets and dietary needs or requirements. And so what we've done is built an architecture that looks at that future state habitat, where what are the resources that we're going to have? We're going to have carbon dioxide. If you've got a human there, you're emitting about 1 kilogram of CO2 a day. You've got water, oxygen. You've got nutrients from waste streams, and you're going to have energy. And so how do you build that ecosystem around that? And so our solutions really have developed as an architecture of technologies that we can look and deploy these projects here on Earth. Because this is the experience that we want when we go to space. We don't necessarily want to be sort of how Matt Damon was surviving. That's not the situation we're optimizing for. And so this takes investment. This takes focus. This takes the smartest and brightest minds in the world to be able to attack this. And so if you're listening to this, if you know somebody that's interested in aerospace and agriculture, this is the time to be involved and getting involved in these different companies, because food is what really brings us together. And food is what is going to help challenge some major problems. This is what's going to bring countries and companies together for collaboration and projects, just like the International Space Station did during the Cold War. We now have an opportunity to address some of the major inequalities in humanity at the moment, and prepare ourselves for a coming and changing climate as the climate becomes more volatile. I think what we can build is an international partnership here on Earth and a global collaboration for food production systems that can unite space agencies, commercial companies, philanthropic team companies, and as well as investors. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate being here. When you look up at the stars and we all look up at the same moon, remember, this is where we want to go, and we want to use that inspiration to help everybody here back on Earth. Thanks very much.
There is absolutely no doubt, Scott, that you like I was getting inspired the whole time. And if the people listening, if you're not like going, how do I sign up? Where do I join the team? Let me go and grow something. This is outstanding. I love your passion. It's obvious. It comes through. And again, what I love about this is that we have here assembled with all of you similar minds, similar trains of thought. Anybody want to weigh in or comment on what Scott just presented?
Well, it's just, I think it's really in line with a lot of things that we're thinking at NASA as well. And, it's solving some big challenges, and we need all the bright minds, like Scott said. They're so interdisciplinary, these challenges, that I think that's what makes this field really interesting for a lot of people, and kind of unique, is that we're working on things that are at the crossroads of so many disciplines. So it's great to see that put together in such a wonderful package.
Again, I cannot wait to share a meal with all of you. But again, I think you guys have all heard your invitation. If you were thinking at all you love to grow things and make things and create a better world, what a better thing than agriculture for space and for sustainability here on Earth. Rounding out our panel today is Dr. Joya Massa, a NASA project scientist. She works on food crop production for the International Space Station and the future of space exploration endeavors. She's led the science team for the initial veggie hardware validation on the space station. Currently, she's heading up an interdisciplinary group to study fertilizer and light impacts on yield, nutrition, flavor, and food safety of veggie grown crops, and to assess crew behavioral health benefits from space crops growth. And in addition, she works with external investigators to help science to function on station. She's also involved with education and outreach programs. She was generous enough to speak to the Janet's Planet Astronaut Academy. And she, again, shares beautifully how plants in space and space food production is achieved. She earned her PhD in plant biology. She has a BS in plant science, and she works in the areas of plant space biology and bioregenerative life support. We're going to find out more about that, I'm sure. And again, we're so very grateful to have you. Please share with us.
Thank you, Janet, and it's an honor to be a part of this fascinating panel. So it's wonderful to be here with all these other innovators. If we can get my slides up, I'm going to talk with you today about space crop production. And so, why plants? You see here this photo of Mike Hopkins on the International Space Station on one of his previous trips, and he's showing the space food that he's eating. And the space food system is really quite excellent. It's quite diverse. But one of the challenges of these prepackaged foods is that over time, with storage time, the nutrition and the quality of the food breaks down. And that's a real risk for Mars right now. So we're looking at growing crops in the first place in the near term to supplement this packaged diet. At the same time that you're growing plants for food, they can provide a psychological connection to Earth for the astronauts. A lot of us garden because we find that relaxing, and imagine how much more important that might be when there is no beautiful planet Earth around you. So we're trying to get more data on this. Plants also recycle our atmosphere. They take up the carbon dioxide that we breathe out, and through the process of photosynthesis, they generate oxygen. So this is going to be a really important part of future space systems. They also take up water, and that water doesn't have to be totally clean water, and they give off completely pure water vapor through their leaves. So there's a lot of potential roles for plants. This is an artist's depiction of what a habitat, on the moon, and it could also be on Mars, might someday look like. And you can see here, we have densely packed layers of plants growing under electric lights inside the habitat where people are living and working and, exercising. It's behind a really thick, sturdy wall, and that's for some of the hazards that you might encounter on this, this surface system, like space radiation, micrometeorites. It's a protected system. This could also be underground. It could be in a lava tube, for instance. We're actually growing plants in similar ways on Earth today in indoor vertical farms and plant factories where we have these densely packed layers of plants growing under electric lights. And this is becoming more and more common for indoor agriculture in urban areas around the world. We're learning a lot from this community for space research, and we are sharing a lot of information with this community from our research. So there's a lot of great benefit to the development of this technology for space. A more near-term scenario might look like this habitat on Mars, where the entire plant growth module could launch on a rocket, and it could be hooked to other modules to form, a habitat that crew could live in, maybe for shorter durations than the previous depiction. And we're actually growing plants like this on Earth today. This is a picture of the South Pole greenhouse at the U.S. Antarctic Station, where, we have volunteers essentially taking care of crops to provide fresh produce over winter for the crews down there. We actually have one of our scientists at a different Antarctic station right now working in a plant growth facility to understand how that isolated, confined environment and the importance of plants in that situation. So our space crop production group, we have a vision, and our vision is to ensure food system security on long duration missions beyond low Earth orbit. And what I mean by food security here is the condition in which the crew have continuous access to sufficient safe and nutritious food, which meets both their dietary needs and food preferences in order to maintain peak health and performance. And so in the near term, we're looking at nutrient supplementation of the prepackaged food, especially when those vitamins degrade over time. And, it's not an issue on the space station because they get new food all the time. But for a Mars mission, a longer mission, it is an issue. And so we need to make sure we give them all the nutrients that they need to function at peak health. But for long term, we're going to start to look at caloric replacement so that we can become more independent from Earth. So for that, we have this sort of candidate crop list that's been developed. And right now we're on the left-hand side of this chart. We're focusing on fresh crops that can be picked and eaten without processing. So our salad crops, we've been growing a lot of leafy greens. We're working on growing in the space station tomatoes and peppers. We've grown radish up there. And these other crops are all kind of in work. Herbs are also being tested on the ground. These would be things that you could add to the packaged diet to change the flavor, to give you variety. You could add them to the salads as well. The staple crops are a little bit farther downstream. And it's not because they're harder to grow. It's because right now we don't have any cooking capabilities on the space station or planned in the works for the early, missions to the moon and Mars. But white potato and sweet potato will be great crops to add calories when you have some ability to cook them. Things like wheat and soybean require a little more processing equipment. You have to have your threshing equipment, your milling equipment. You might need specialized equipment like bread machines and tofu presses. And so that's all launch mass, essentially, and also, of course, labor or robotics. So that's a little bit farther downstream. So our challenges, we can kind of start to characterize them as we have specific challenges for deep space. This would be microgravity, the strange behavior of fluids, lack of convection. We have some challenges that are specific for surface systems. So dust is a real issue on the moon and on the surface of Mars because it hasn't been weathered like it has been on Earth. It can cause a lot of problems. We have partial gravity, and we don't fully understand the effects of that on the biological and the physical systems that we're going to need. We have some challenges that are shared between those two environments. You know, the radiation is quite a big one, and there needs to be considerable work in that area. We'll be operating at reduced pressure. We have the hazards of micrometeorites. We have some crop-specific challenges down at the bottom there, some that, you know, are very relevant for terrestrial crop systems, like how to increase productivity, how to have stress tolerance and optimize your environment, and how to even schedule the use of your growing area. And then we have some challenges that are really shared by all of these different realms. You know, we have to have very small plants. We're growing under high carbon dioxide. We have to be very concerned about food safety and the health of our microbiome in this closed system. We need to get all the nutrients out and do it in a very sustainable fashion when we have non-biological stresses, limited vehicle resources, limited crew time. You know, how do we handle waste? All of these things are things that we think about. So we have a roadmap for exploration, and we're doing work right now on the ground and on the International Space Station. And, you know, for the International Space Station, we're identifying a lot of different challenges and solutions. The big difference between this and our ground studies, of course, is the difference of gravity and the impacts of microgravity. But we're still pretty much protected by the Earth's magnetic field, even on the space station. So radiation is not as big a concern. When we go to the next step, which for spaceflight will be our lunar gateway platform, then we're going to start to have radiation as an issue, but we'll still have microgravity. So the testing that we're doing on the space station will help feed into that, which will ultimately feed into what needs to be done for a transit mission to Mars to have an operational crop production system. On the ground, you know, we're doing testing with gravity, and we think that this gravity is going to be somewhat relative to lunar gravity and Martian surface gravity. So having a little bit of gravity may solve some of those challenges. But again, on the lunar surface, you have this radiation, and gravity is a lot lower. Will 16G be enough? We'll be able to test some operational systems on the lunar surface for the Martian surface. So we're doing this kind of an incrementally approach. Right now, as I mentioned, we're testing a lot on the International Space Station. And the ISS is our orbiting laboratory where we've had people living and working for more than 20 years now. So it's an amazing resource to be able to do this testing. And we have two large plant research capabilities on the International Space Station. VEGI, which is a very simple system. It's really got lights and fans, and everything else is manual. And then advanced plant habitat, which is our more complex plant physiology research chamber, where we have over 180 different sensors and control systems. We've done a lot of work in veggie, specifically with leafy green crops. And here you see Shane Kimbrough harvesting red romaine lettuce. And we've tested a number of new crop varieties recently, and you can see some of those here. Two of those varieties were grown very recently. The bottom two, the Amara mustard and the extra dwarf pak choi, were just recently harvested on the International Space Station. And interestingly, two of these varieties were crops selected by middle school and high school students in a program that we have called Growing Beyond Earth, in partnership with the Fairchild Tropical Botanic Gardens in Miami, where we have these student citizen scientists helping us to select crops for space. So that's been a really exciting and wonderful thing to be involved with. Recently, here you see Mike Hopkins growing radishes and harvesting some of the radishes from the advanced plant habitat test. So this was the first time that astronauts got to eat radishes and grew a crop in this hardware. And that was very exciting. Mike also did some really interesting experiments earlier this year, including demonstrating transplanting between plant pillows in the veggie unit, which is how our crops are grown. You can see this small transplant on the left-hand side of the slide. That's something that, you know, a lot of the roots got kind of damaged. Removing it from the plant pillow, there's really no easy way to do this. On Earth, that plant probably wouldn't have survived. But if you look on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that that transplanted plant actually survived and did really well. It was something where the microgravity fluids challenge actually worked in our favor in this case. So that was super exciting. And Mike also tested astronaut handling and planting of seeds with the seed film technology. And you see here the red romaine lettuce that he grew with this. So we're developing and testing new iterative technologies to get more of these challenges figured out for future crop production. There's also a tremendous opportunity here, not just to develop new hardware or new technologies, but to develop new crops. So targeted breeding or genetic engineering of crops specifically focused on developing space crops. And there's a number of areas that we've identified and subcategories in those areas where plant breeding could give us crops of the future that may grow well in that environment. So I'll just stop there with a beautiful photo of a flower arrangement that was done from some zinnias that were grown on the space station, and look forward to some questions.
You know, as somebody who loves to have fresh flowers on her table, that is also equally as exciting. I mean, what you guys are talking about is so beautiful. And the fact that you're already proving some of these mechanisms on the ISS. I'd love right now to open it up to a few questions, and please, anybody who wants to jump in. But one of my first questions is, why are bioregenerative systems necessary for deep space? Help us understand that.
I might give some light on this one. So you know that access to fresh food is a main obstacle for, as we've been discussing. It limits how far away from Earth we can travel and how long we can stay in space. And in the equation, we have two problems. The first one is that we are limited by rocket speed. Mm-hmm. So I'll share my screen. It might be illustrative as well. So the first one is we're pretty slow. Our top speed is currently 40,000 kilometers an hour, and Mars is like 200 million kilometers away. So the trip is pretty long. Mm-hmm. And food is crucial for this long journey, but in space, we cannot store too much, and we cannot keep the ingredients too long, as nutrients degrade. So we cannot store too much, as Scott said earlier, because this would cost a fortune in terms of spaceships sent prior to our landing. And the second one is that astronauts need good and fresh food, as it means better mood, happier and healthier crews, so more productive, because they need to be highly productive. So the solution is to produce on premises, as we said, and what I wanted to illustrate is the way that we want to do it. So our vision for this bioregenerative system is that we are looking for water. Water is essential for life, and we pray for our ability to deliver and harvest and dig for water on the moon and on Mars. For the moment, it looks pretty positive. And so for instance, for us, water is more than 90% of our inputs, and most of our medium is recycled. So we believe that we can efficiently produce fresh food for the astronauts on the moon and Mars and beyond with minimal resupply. And this is absolutely a game changer for Earth, and this will benefit Earth. And just on our own system, I'll just go more into details. When we think of food production on Earth, we think about feed conversion ratio. Plants are, as Jerry said, are very efficient in terms of converting feed into food or proteins. compared to large mammals and cows, for instance, which require a monumental amount of feed. So the idea is really to find the right balance in terms of what can be grown and how efficiently it is done. What we're discovering that the new innovations coming to fruition, pretty much in we can see in algae, in all these elements, and this brings a new light to what can be done here to save our major strategic food security problem in most countries, in many countries.
And I have to ask you now, how much, what's the price of a steak dinner on Mars?
So we looked at the latest data from NASA, which speaks for themselves, and the reality is not necessarily the cost, because as we've seen with the Starship, we can send hundreds of them, and apparently the technology is improving like almost daily. We're very surprised, positively surprised. It's what SpaceX is doing is quite amazing, but the reality is we're talking about the freshness of food. We're talking about micronutrients. This is what Shireen said earlier. So yes, we can send a lot of packaged food, but the reality is that it doesn't deliver what we need. When you see how vitamin C, in fact, is degrading so fast, but it's not only that, it's pretty much everything. So coming back to the price of the steak on Mars, we currently have no idea. We know that just this $1 water bottle sent to just the ISS, which is 400 kilometers away, costs like $10,000, maybe less, maybe more. Just 1 liter of water, and the fact is that this price doesn't even include the forensic food preparation, the research, and so on. So, in addition, all this, as Julia said, comes into rations. So, yes, there's a lot of variety, but still, it's rations. So you feel really in the military, in a remote area where, I mean, this is still limited compared to what the wealth of food that we have here. And as Scott said, this food is pretty much everything for humans. It's gathering, it's a reunion, and so on. So as all astronauts will confirm, the space food is so-so. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that it's why the NASA and Canadian Space Agency Deep Space Food Challenge would be an Apollo moment. It's because it will bring about a revolution in terms of thinking food for remote areas, specifically for space, but also for here. So we are really praying for this moment to happen.
You know, I with all of you brilliant people, I have no doubt. Shireen, I've got a question for you. With all the work that you're doing, it sounds like the goal of Astrius is to kind of create almost like very personalized nutrients, but really personalized medicine. I mean, that could transform everything. If we figure out how to do this for astronauts and those traveling to space, we figure out how to really personalize medicine for humans here on Earth, right?
Definitely. And when we talk about personalized nutrition, it's really important to understand that the joy and pleasure of eating cannot be removed from the food that one consumes. And so if we were to just think of nutrition as calories in, calories out, it removes from the scene what really makes us human, which is eating and enjoying that. So for us, personalized nutrition isn't just understanding the health benefits, but also the psychological motivation and the desire to eat. And so we curate food in alignment with what are the needs of astronauts, and then looking back on Earth, understanding the demographic needs of people and what it is that motivates them to choose optimized health. So instead of just saying, this is good for your health and thus you should eat it, looking at this is pleasurable, and so you desire eating it, and it's that which really results in a sustainability. A lot of people, starting the new year, they say, hey, I'm going to get back on the health wagon. The people drop off because there isn't that joy associated with it. So we're all about invoking joy and pleasure when it comes to nutrition and food.
I'm in. I cannot wait again to try some of this stuff. Now, Joya and Scott, when you hear everybody's presenting these amazing ideas, what I mean, what's the next steps for you guys? I mean, are the crops going to be grown by humans or by robots? Can we already grow things in Martian soil? These are the things I'm sure people are wondering.
Well, I think that's really important, and it also ties in with the psychology of, that was being discussed, and one of the things that we try to remember is that we're not sending people to Mars, at least in the early years, to be subsistence farmers. We're sending people to Mars to explore Mars and to find out all the incredible things that we're going to learn from being on that planet. And so having automation and robotics that could take care of, for crop growth specifically, all aspects of the crop growth, with the option that the humans could intervene when they want to pick the ripe tomato or the ripe strawberry. I think that's kind of our go forward plan right now. We want to have the crop growth and the agriculture in general not be an added burden to the crew. We want it to be something, enjoyable, because, they're going to be very far away from home. Having really good tasting food, I agree, that's a really critical part of keeping people healthy and happy. They're giving up a lot to go on these missions. Yes, it's an amazing experience, but you're giving up, years of time with your family and friends, and, you don't want to give up good food and you don't want to just be doing work all the time. So I think automation and robotics are going to have a really important role in the future of agriculture off planet.
And Scott, I loved your idea too about, I want your thoughts on this, but also that kind of dual purpose of agrovoltaics, the fact that we can produce food and also energy. Again, that's a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, agrovoltaics is sort of one of those no-brainer type of concepts. I mean, it really, crops are solar collectors. They're converting solar energy into food, and so, or into their cell mass and their the body of the plant. And so these end up being the places in the world where it actually is already really well situated for us to produce energy. Where we've got farms, and the really big problem is if we start destroying these agriculture lands to start producing energy, which we also need, and we don't have this integration, this is going to lead to really big problems. And so, we've seen some great tests, and there's some fantastic experiments taking place in Germany and in France and a couple of places in the United States, but we don't really see these deployments really at large scale. So, we're one of our projects. We're focused on developing an agrivoltaic demonstration project to demonstrate to farmers how they can begin to adapt this technology. And this is applicable in space too. Now, we don't have arable land that we're destroying, but the integration and the symbiotic relationship between energy generation, shading, and temperature control, they're really these key benefits. And when we think about it is in the future, is it possible to start growing crops in Martian soil? It's not. We're not going to just. Plants aren't going to be living outside of a protected structure. And so you need to think about, okay, well, if you're going to have these large structures that you are able to then produce crops and food, utilizing that infrastructure, that entire system in the most efficient way possible, you have to start thinking about these symbiotic relationships. And so the understanding and the work that we're doing here on Earth has those applicable applications in the space domain as well.
Now, that's very exciting to me, because it's like, as here on Earth, it can also be out in space. And then what we discover out there could also be so powerful for here. So I want everybody to answer this next question. What is the plant or vegetable, fruit, etc.? What is the thing you want most to be grown on Mars? What is I gotta have this if I'm going to go to Mars?
I can start with that. Mine's the banana. It's my favorite fruit, and yeah, I don't want to go without a banana.
All right, we got banana. I'm going to go with, you got to have some peanuts somewhere, because I need peanut butter to go with that banana. Joya, what do you have? What's your have to have on
Well,
Mars?
if I was going, I think it would have to be, cacao and have chocolate, because I can't imagine life without that in a long term. But easier would probably be sweet potato. I mean, they grow great. You can eat the leaves, you can eat the roots, and they're just super productive. So I would pick both of those.
And I love your sweet potato idea, but I got to go with what Shireen was saying. There's something mental about a day when I have done all my work and I can reach for a piece of chocolate, and that's my reward. So I'm gonna keep your feet to the fire on that cacao. What about you, Shireen? What is your must-have on Mars?
First of all, I'm grinning from ear to ear as you're saying chocolate, because Asterisk's first product is actually a highly luxurious truffle that offers 100% of your micronutrients in a single bite. So we are launching this summer, and I cannot wait for you to taste it, because we determined that astronauts love chocolate. They have a nutrient deficiency. So what other way to give you pleasure and maximum benefit than putting it in a luxurious truffle? So that just makes me absolutely delighted. But when it comes to what I would love to have grown there, I really believe spices are incredibly important, because you must add flavor to what you're eating. And I grew up in Norway, where when my mom first came there from Bangladesh, there weren't too many spices. And so for her, it was very, very difficult to enjoy food, because coming from Bangladesh, spices are a way to actually mask flavors of food that isn't prepared in the highest way. Unlike France, where you have the highest quality meat, you don't have that back in the East as much. So I would actually say chili pepper, because it is a way to kick up the spice. It goes really well with chocolate. It goes well with savory. So that would be my plant of choice.
Well, we're launching chili peppers at the end of this month or early next month to Space Station. We're going to try them out. So that's very exciting to hear.
How about you, Pascal? What's your must-have on Mars?
Well, I would agree with chocolate, banana, and sweet potatoes for sure. And I would add strawberries, which is easier.
Strawberries. Well, you know what? We're on, and then as long as Pascal, you bring the steak, we're close to having that full meal. I think we've got a sweet potato to go with our steak, a little aperitif there, and then a dessert. So I think we are on to something. I know that we're going to have lots of. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Charlie.
I just have one bit that I'd like to add. We speak a lot about colonization and farming, and for me, the socioeconomic impact of that doesn't escape me. Chocolate is something that we love dearly, and yet there is still to this day an active slave trade where children are the ones harvesting chocolate. And I mention it because when it comes to humanity in space, we're taking the best of humanity out there. And so I really hope that the future forward impact of harvesting and farming and agriculture makes us reflect on the way that we operate on Earth. Because when it comes to even the first colonizers, slave trade was a huge component of that, whether you're picking cotton, and even to this day, there are major corporations that make billions of dollars, and yet they still employ child slavery to get the chocolate. So just bringing that back in, because when we talk about the pleasure of food, we can't lose sight of where that food originates and how we get it to our table.
Thank you so much for bringing that to top of mind, because it's like as we gather here, it is our mission as well at Explore Mars to like truly ask humans to be their utmost. Because if we're going to venture out there, we're going to have to learn how to be our best people, to continue like with great mental health, to feed and nurture our bodies, minds, and souls. And so thank you for saying that, because how we do things matters as much as what we are planning on doing. So thank you guys for being so wonderfully astute in thinking about those things. Any last things you want to say to our audience before we open it up for questions from them?
I can just quickly add just on the chocolate conversation, and this applies to really all the food that we eat. It comes down to our personal decisions, and we vote with our dollar every single meal that we eat. 3 times a day, where you're sourcing your food, your selection of, if you're going to choose a burger that is made, or a steak that's made from a regular cow, or when you have the option to have a cellular agriculture based burger, that decision difference has huge repercussions from an environmental standpoint, from your local economy standpoint, from how our earth is going to be more sustainable, and right down to rainforests in Brazil standpoint. And the same thing applies to chocolate. Choosing to buy, it's a more expensive chocolate bar, but it's more expensive because it's not that you're not getting free child labor. And so it's the consumer conscious decisions and making their smarter food purchasing decisions, and understanding those supply chains and understanding the ingredients that are part of that, and demanding from the companies that we vote with our dollars with that they are transparent about what they're doing, where they're sourcing from. Those are the decisions that motivate investors. Those are the decisions that motivate executives. Those are decisions that change our supply chains. And that's where I think society, we can make the fastest change and impact into the climate, where agriculture accounts for 24% of the global greenhouse gas emissions and a significant amount of our land use. So these individual contribution decisions and voices, that's really where individuals have the power, the strongest power, more than going and buying a Tesla and feeling good about not having a gas-powered vehicle. Food decisions and choices, and your voice there has much stronger pathway. So, just wanted to say that for something we can all act on.
No, I love it. Go ahead,
I would
Pastor.
add one thing about your passion, Janet, which is education. And the next generation and the current generation has to be more sensitive or sensitivized to these options that we have every day in our choices. And I wanted to underline the fact that we have a Gen Z board dedicated to the younger generation. It's our second cohort, and it's pretty much open to anyone, anywhere, everybody who's interested. And what is very interesting also is that we have a section dedicated to space, to get involved in what we're designing for space exploration, because we are adults. We already have quite strong biases, while this new generation are asking really amazing questions, and they can bring life to new projects. It's really happening in our case. So I would really underline the education of the younger generation.
And thank you for that, Pascal, because that is, as you guys all know, I make no secret at all about that. That is my heart and passion, is to see these children stand in their magnificence, making these strong decisions, creating this better world and better humanity that we all envision. And space does indeed inspire that and embolden that. And so we are so very grateful to all of you. Let me just say that being surrounded by such great minds and hearts, I think this is evidenced so well by all the things you've said. Again, you are among those great humans that are leading the way for future space exploration, and it is quite exciting. And I am certain that our audience's kind of space food appetite is ready and wanting to make sure that they test out all your designs. I cannot wait to try your truffle there, Shireen, I have to say. But thank you all. Thank you for all the innovation and brilliance that you are doing, and the great work that you are about. In fact, if any of you guys are students, I would encourage you to check out Aleph Farms and see if you might be able to be part of that advisory board and have your voices heard as well. And thank you to our audience and attendees. There are more great sessions coming your way here at the Mars Innovation Forum. Thank you, everyone.